July 4th, 1987. North Unit, Penitentiary of New Mexico, just outside Santa Fe. The sky is black and restless, a stiff wind-rattling razor wire above a fortress built for the state's most dangerous men. Inside, the North Unit sleeps in uneasy silence. Concrete corridors lined with the faces of killers, rapists, men serving out life sentences with no hope and nothing left to lose. This is Level 6, the end of the line. Every door is steel, every movement is watched, and routine is the only thing stronger than the walls here. But as the first light bleeds over the desert, that routine is about to shatter. In a matter of minutes, 7 inmates will do the impossible. They will break out, vanish into the wild, and turn Independence Day into the most hunted night in New Mexico's history. This day will become a waking nightmare for the guards, the city, and every family within 100 miles. What unfolds is no accident. This plan is born of months, maybe years, of careful, invisible preparation. Questions hang in the air before the alarm sounds. How did they do it? Who opened the door, smuggled in the weapon, mapped the blind spots, and killed the alarms? And as the sun rises, one thing is sure. The men who built the walls are about to find out what happens when the monsters get out. In Level 6, routine and danger sleep side by side in concrete silence, where every slight movement can flip ordinary minutes into violence. For William Gilbert, a 4-time murderer whose very presence drains the color from the guards' faces, every day is the same: mop and bucket, silence, the hum of fluorescent lights. But Gilbert has not landed the janitor job by chance. For months, perhaps years, he has worked to be just another pair of steady hands, taking the tedious shifts, blending in, never making waves. His quietness earns him trust. It was a job that offered subtle power, sweeping past every locked door, noting the guards' patterns, lingering by the security desk a beat longer than necessary. In the eyes of the staff, he became part of the background, reliable and invisible. But this morning, the line between those two states vanishes. In a crazy turn of events, Gilbert produces a gun, a weapon nobody ever managed to trace, and within moments, he has released 6 other inmates from their cells. James Kinslow, a serial rapist and killer; David Gallegos, an armed robber; Robert Davis, a former police officer turned criminal; John Schmidt, Hector Torres, and Michael Romero, each serving time for crimes that turned their names into warnings. There is no wasted motion. They force themselves into the control room, neutralize the guards, and climb a maintenance ladder to an emergency hatch. They pull a guard with them as a hostage, moving along the roof with the nervous certainty of men who have rehearsed this crossing in their minds 100 times before. They search for the point where the perimeter fence folds into the building, where a short jump will put them on the outside. When they find it, they move quickly, handcuffing the guard to the fence, making no threats, just moving with the efficiency of men with nothing left to lose. Within seconds, they are gone, slipping into the wild scrublands surrounding the prison. The guard, dazed but alive, staggers to the nearest phone and triggers the alarm. For the first time in years, the walls mean nothing. Inside, officials are stunned, caught between disbelief and panic as they realize that the North Unit, supposedly the state's most secure, has failed in less than 2 minutes. There is no guard in the tower to spot them. The roof sensors, meant to be the last line of defense, are dead, killed by budget cuts and indifference. No one yet knows if the escapees found this weakness by luck or design. And there we have it. 7 men, each with nothing to lose, now move free. Within minutes, the prison slams into lockdown, a wall of confusion rising just as the fugitives disappear into the dawn. And every officer in the state will soon be on high alert, their faces and names spreading through radios, faxes, and word of mouth faster than any car could drive. And so the game begins. 7 men in the wind, The system that built the walls suddenly left holding only questions, and a state waking up to the possibility that for the first time in memory, the monsters are on the outside looking back in. The moment the alarm is raised, every brittle prison routine layer collapses. Inside the penitentiary of New Mexico, officers sprint down corridors slick with fear, radios pressed to their lips, calling frantic headcounts that turn up 7 names and 7 empty spaces. Outside, the memory of a quiet, uneventful Independence Day already feels like a lie. It was an Independence Day shattered by the knowledge that a new crisis is erupting and spilling into the world. There is shouting in the control rooms, keys jangling as locks are thrown, radios crackling with voices too urgent to wait their turn. There is a scramble to seal every wing, lock down the yards, and station men at every gate and perimeter fence. But for the 7 who are already gone, that tidal wave of action and noise is nothing but wasted energy. It is as pointless as shouting at the wind. Still pulling on his uniform, the warden dials the New Mexico State Police. His voice trembles like a shockwave, gathering momentum with each new telling. 7 armed robbers, rapists, murderers, names that make even veteran officers pause and trade uneasy looks. Gilbert, Kinslow, Gallegos, Davis, Schmidt, Torres, Romero, men with long memories and nothing left to lose, last seen vanishing into the scrubland that hems the prison's back fences, moving fast, possibly armed, and indeed desperate. Within minutes, a patchwork of police, sheriff's deputies, state troopers, and tribal officers from Pueblos up and down the Rio Grande is fanned out across the region. They clip their radios to their vests, and adrenaline rises in every word as they slam down roadblocks on every highway, county road, and back road running out from Santa Fe. This turns a patch of northern New Mexico into a grid of checkpoints and tension, and each man wonders which passing car or shadow in the brush might hold a killer. Helicopters are launched and equipped with infrared cameras to slice through the scrub and darkness, with their pilots scanning for any trace of movement. At the same time, canine units work the scent trails left behind by the escapees, each dog tugging at the leash as they trace paths that end cold at Interstate 25. Too clean, too sudden, hinting at a waiting car, at outside help, at a plan more organized than anyone wants to admit. Inside the North Unit, the questions multiply as investigators tear apart the cell blocks for clues, confiscating maps, radio codes, aeronautical charts, and evidence that the men did not run blindly, but carried out and escaped, so meticulously prepared that even the seasoned staff are forced to wonder how many cracks run through their so-called fortress. Someone smuggled a gun inside. Someone provided knowledge of the sensors, towers, and schedules, and perhaps someone waited beyond the walls with cash, a car, and a roadmap out of the state. The public is notified, first with a bulletin, then with a barrage of mugshots and warnings that paint Santa Fe as a city besieged by its own outcasts. The message unmistakable: these are not thieves looking for a score, but men who have already killed, who will kill again, and who now have every reason to see the world as prey and the law as a threat to be destroyed. The governor, pressed by rising panic and haunted by the specter of bloodshed, issues an extraordinary order: use the National Guard, seal the roads, and if necessary, shoot to kill. For the first time in living memory, the citizens of New Mexico find themselves at the center of a story in which every shadow could be hiding a fugitive, and every knock at the door could mean life or death. The perimeter expands. Hundreds of officers, some on dirt bikes, sweep the land in ever-widening circles, searching ravines, checking barns, and interrogating anyone with a story that doesn't quite fit. Meanwhile, at the prison, officials work through endless visitor logs, phone records, and every scrap of communication, desperate to find the thread that might unravel the plan and close the net before the men vanish for good. But as the hours slide by and the sun rises over the desert, no one knows if they are chasing shadows, ghosts, or men already far beyond the reach of the law. 2 days pass, and every passing hour sharpens the anxiety in Santa Fe, as police and FBI agents work double shifts, combing every back alley, rivered, and lonely stretch of desert for the 7 men whose mugshots now paper the windows of every gas station and whose names anchor every news report. Each tip phoned in from a nervous resident sends squads scrambling, lights flashing down streets that haven't seen this much police presence in decades. Inside the war room, stacks of leads pile higher, strangers seen moving through neighborhoods, strange cars abandoned at the edge of town, a half-eaten meal left on a porch. Still, most trails end in disappointment, false alarms that only reinforce the sense of dread building among officers and civilians alike, who know that it only takes one mistake, one moment of inattention, for a home to be invaded or a life to be ended. The first real crack comes not from a gunfight or a car chase, but from a simple act of vigilance. At a racetrack 2 miles from the prison, a security guard on patrol spots a lone figure moving awkwardly through the early morning haze. Acting on pure instinct sharpened by days of tension, he confronts the stranger before the man can bolt, cuffs him, and radios for backup. Within minutes, the suspect is confirmed as Hector Torres, one of the escapees, exhausted and disoriented, whose own story is as fractured as the circumstances that set him free. Interrogators press Torres for names and routes, for hints of a larger plan, but he offers little, claiming to have wandered for hours with no direction and no knowledge of the real architects behind the break. His capture is a slight relief, but only intensifies the pressure to locate the remaining 6, especially as every officer on the search understands that the most dangerous men, Gilbert, Kinslow, Gallegos, and Davis, are still at large, and if Torres is telling the truth, working as a team with a ruthlessness that the state has not seen in decades. The next sign comes not from police work, but from the nervous eyes of a teenage girl, babysitting her young cousin in a quiet Santa Fe suburb. She peeks out a window and sees a man approaching the house, calling the police as he tries the doors and windows, her voice trembling as she describes every movement to the dispatcher. When the man finally flees, police find only a stolen bread bag. Still, the girl's positive identification of David Gallegos, one of the fugitives, sends SWAT teams sweeping through the neighborhood, searching every home and yard in a mile-wide radius. Still, the fugitives vanish, blending into the quiet sprawl of the city, leaving only fear in their wake and the growing certainty among law enforcement that the escapees are not just hiding. They are hunting, scavenging, waiting for a moment to turn the tables and slip past the roadblocks choking every exit from Santa Fe. But then, on the back of a flat truck pulled over by a highway patrol officer 85 miles to the south, police find Robert Davis, former cop turned armed robber, hiding under a tarp. His arrest, unlike Torres's, is a break in more ways than one, because when detectives question Davis, he finally cracks, piecing together the escape from its earliest stages and pointing police toward the final trio: Gilbert, Kinslow, and Gallegos, the men who have haunted every lawman's nightmares since the morning the alarm first sounded. With Davis in custody, the manhunt pivots, the pressure mounting as every officer on the case knows that the longer the last 3 remain free, the more dangerous they become, not only to the public, but to anyone who dares stand in their way. As the days bleed into weeks, the last 3 fugitives, William Gilbert, James Kinslow, and David Gallegos, become ghosts in the borderlands. They slip past the collapsing perimeter of roadblocks and police dragnet, aided by friends, family, and a level of discipline that law enforcement grudgingly admits is rare among prison escapees. With every day they stay free, the tension builds, not just for the officers searching, but for every resident within 100 miles who sees their faces on the nightly news and wonders how long before their quiet street turns into a front line. Investigators push past exhaustion, cycling through hundreds of leads, abandoned cars, late-night break-ins, whispered tips from informants and nervous relatives, until a pattern finally emerges, one that points west. toward the border, toward California, where family ties and the anonymity of sprawling cities might offer the fugitives a way to disappear for good. But before they can vanish, the three men must survive, eat, hide, and risk every encounter for a few more hours of freedom. It is here, in the tension between flight and survival, that the violence erupts. In Arizona, James Kinslow breaks into a family's home, stealing not just food and weapons, but the sense of safety that anchors everyday life. He corrals the family at gunpoint, forces them into their car, and with the terrified parents and their 11-year-old daughter, drives for hundreds of miles across the desert. A mobile hostage crisis that turns every highway patrol officer into a potential savior and every passing car into a threat. By the time Kinslow abandons the parents in a motel room and flees with their daughter into California, law enforcement's fear turns into action. FBI agents and local police close in on the border area, tracking Kinslow's movements with an urgency matched only by the urgency of a child's life at stake. It is through both luck and the child's bravery that, after hours on the run, she escapes and finds help. She flags down a patrol car and relays details that will help close the noose around Kinslow and, by extension, the remaining fugitives. Her courage gives police the break they need. And soon, Garden Grove detectives are circling the neighborhood, eyes peeled for the stolen van and the men whose freedom has always been measured in blood and fear. In the pre-dawn darkness, as the SWAT team moves in, the final drama plays out not with a firefight, but with a flashbang and a flurry of arrests. Kinslow is taken without resistance, his weapons scattered on the floor of the van. And in a last act of self-preservation, he gives up Gilbert and Gallegos, telling the FBI exactly where to find them, just blocks away, hiding in a motel, surrounded by the law, their final moments of freedom already slipping away. As dawn breaks, the FBI moves fast and hard, raiding the motel room, weapons drawn, adrenaline high, and within seconds, William Gilbert and David Gallegos are in custody. The months of planning, the desperate flight, the violence and fear, all of it ends in a matter of heartbeats, with the ringleaders face down on a cheap motel carpet, the chase over. But as the last fugitives are driven back behind the razor wire and every headline declares victory, one question still hangs in the stale air of the North Unit, a question that no warden, no FBI agent, and no investigator can quite answer. Who helped them? Was it a guard quietly paid off before the alarm sounded, a visitor slipping more than cigarettes through the glass, or someone still inside, watching from a cell as the story played out, already planning for the next time? No one ever finds the gun, and no one takes credit for the maps, the clothes, or the rides out of town. The escape is over, but the secrets aren't. The person who made the Santa Fe 7 possible is still out there somewhere, inside or outside. When the last cuffs snap shut and the motel lights fade, relief sweeps through the law enforcement community and the streets of Santa Fe alike. But the story does not end with 7 men in chains. Instead, it reverberates through courtrooms, government offices, and the very architecture of American prisons, exposing a network of failures and a system strained to its breaking point. In the weeks following the capture, the escape is dissected at every level. How a gun made it inside the North Unit, how William Gilbert, a quadruple murderer, orchestrated a breakout so fast and so disciplined that it blindsided even the most seasoned wardens, how budget cuts, inoperative alarms, and an unmanned tower left a gap wide enough for 7 men to vanish into the desert night, and how, in less than 2 minutes, a routine day in the most secure facility in New Mexico unraveled into chaos, putting every family in Santa Fe on edge and every official on notice. The outrage is instant. Local news splashes mugshots and security lapses across the front page. Politicians promise inquiries, and the Department of Corrections faces harsh public scrutiny, forced to admit what everyone already knows. The system broke down, and it nearly cost innocent lives. In response, New Mexico launches a rapid overhaul of its penitentiary system, and millions are poured into new perimeter alarms, better surveillance, fortified control rooms, and more rigorous staff training. Policies are rewritten, towers are staffed around the clock, and protocols for headcounts, lockdowns, and emergency responses are drilled until every guard knows what is at stake, not just for the inmates, but for every citizen living within reach of the next escape. For the men themselves, there is no return to the life they knew, not even the bleak routines of their old cell blocks. Additional charges are filed, stacking decades onto sentences already defined by violence and loss. For Gilbert, Kinslow, Gallegos, and the others, parole is a word that will never again have meaning. Every court date is met with new shackles, new security, new reminders that whatever small freedom was tasted in July 1987 will never be repeated. Yet the scars linger. For the families of the hostages, for the communities shaken by home invasions and abductions, and for the system itself, forever haunted by the knowledge that even the best designed fortress can be breached if the right combination of cunning, luck, and negligence aligns. In the end, the story of the Santa Fe 7 becomes a warning etched into the history of American corrections, a reminder that every lock is only as strong as the people who turn the key, and that every system, no matter how secure, is built on the fragile, fallible decisions of human beings. The story doesn't end when the last cell door slams shut. For the 7 men who shattered the security of the North Unit, the price of freedom, however brief, comes due in the cold, bureaucratic aftermath. Each escapee faces a fresh battery of charges: aggravated escape, kidnapping, assault on staff, weapons possession, and for some, a new count of armed robbery or car theft committed during those desperate days on the run. Prosecutors waste no time. Within weeks, indictments are filed, and the men are paraded back through the courts they once thought they'd left behind forever. The punishments are severe. Solitary confinement becomes the default, not just as a penalty, but as a precaution. 23 hours a day in a concrete cell, meals pushed through a slot, every personal belonging confiscated, every privilege stripped. Transfers follow, one after another, as the Department of Corrections scatters the escapees to distant, higher security prisons, supermax units in Colorado and Arizona for the ringleaders, disciplinary lockdown for the rest, all contact with one another forbidden by strict administrative order. For William Gilbert, James Kinslow, and David Gallegos, the architects of the escape, there is no hope of parole, no reduction for time served, only a life sentence that grows heavier with every infraction added to their records. Gilbert, already serving life for murder, now faces decades more in stacked sentences. Kinslow, whose crimes after the escape haunt every report, is branded too dangerous for even the toughest state facilities, and spends the following years in near-total isolation, moved only under heavy guard, and sometimes shackled by wrist and ankle. For the others, Davis, Schmidt, Torres, and Romero, any chance at early release vanishes. The escape becomes a stain that no hearing board will ever overlook. But the consequences ripple outward. Dozens of correctional officers face disciplinary review. Some lose their jobs, accused of negligence, or worse, willful blindness, or even quiet collaboration. The warden's resignation comes quietly, a casualty of public outrage and political fallout. State legislators demand inquiries, and federal monitors arrive to audit every procedure and blind spot in the old system. In the end, the prison itself is changed. New cameras, more armed posts, and the quiet but absolute knowledge that the next attempt, if it comes, will face a fortress rebuilt, its weaknesses hardened in the memory of July 1987. For the Santa Fe 7, there is no glory, only the iron certainty that what began as a bid for freedom ends as a cautionary tale written in closed case files, cold walls, and years lost to the aftermath. The prison walls stand unchanged against the desert wind, but inside, nothing is the same. The escape leaves scars, some obvious, some invisible. In the months and years that follow, New Mexico's entire correctional system is put on trial, not just in the courts, but in the court of public opinion. Grand juries convene, reports are published, and security budgets are rewritten from the top down. For the families of the guards taken hostage, the terror of those hours lingers long after the headlines fade. For the citizens of Santa Fe, the memory of sleepless nights and locked doors is slow to disappear. And yet, the questions remain, which the official record never honestly answers. Who smuggled the gun past the metal detectors? How many staff turned a blind eye, or worse? How many friends, family members, and distant acquaintances risked everything for a phone call, a ride, or a bag of groceries left at a prearranged spot in the dark? In the official narrative, it's all resolved. New protocols, technology, and faces in the watchtowers. But inside the Old North Unit, among the men who remember July 4th, 1987, there is still a quiet knowledge that for all the concrete and steel, for all the new locks and armed patrols, the line between order and chaos is thinner than most people care to admit. For law enforcement, it's a story with a clean ending, 7 men out, 7 men back in, and a list of lessons learned in hard ink and overtime hours. But for the system itself, the legacy is more complicated. The Santa Fe 7 escape exposes every weakness, the failures of bureaucracy, the danger of underfunding, and the cost of complacency. In the end, the prison is just a mirror reflecting the desperation of its inmates and the blind spots of those who keep them. And as the dust settles, the last word belongs not to the prisoners, nor to the guards, nor even to the men who led the manhunt, but to the unspoken question every warden, every guard, every resident of Santa Fe still asks when the wind rattles the wire at night. If it happened once, could it happen again? If you found this story gripping, subscribe for more true crime and real history. What other prison stories do you want to see next? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the most secure walls hide the deepest cracks.